Welcome to the Classic Podcast, the podcast that nerds out about cars one model at a time. And eagle-eyed or eagle-eared viewers and listeners might remember that we called it the That's Classic Podcast last time, and then we had a change of heart and decided to call it just Classic.
It might have been a typo. I wonder if I misspelled classic or something. But yeah, classic just seemed like a good name.
Yeah.
Classic with a K, like sick. Sick cars. Sick classic cars.
Yeah. So I'm Felix, and you're?
I'm Greg.
And welcome to this episode.
Last time we were in the showroom in Stockholm at Kaiser Classic, where I work. But today I've made the trip over to Felix's house, which is a couple of hours outside of Stockholm in the countryside. And it's nice to be in your garage, resting up against this beautiful old thing.
Yeah.
We'll see how this works today.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool little space.
This is my safe haven.
Yeah, safe from children. But we did hear them outside at it, so they will try and crawl through the windows and attack us at some point.
They might.
Have you locked the door?
Yeah. Obviously. So first things first, what have you been up to lately?
Had a busy week at work, been selling a few cars, which has been really good. Been out for a few drives. I bought my own car. That was quite exciting. So yeah, I've had a few interesting, since I moved to Sweden, had a few interesting cars. I obviously bought Felix's 94 as we discussed last time. But had a Plymouth Valiant as well, which is a really cool old thing. I was pretty happy with those cars. Like I wasn't really looking to change, but had the opportunity. We had an orange 911T that had been at work for a while. The day it came in, I totally fell in love with it. Steel wheels, a really original car, like nothing fancy or flash about it. A little bit rusty, had a few issues. It was just a really humble little thing, and we had so many customers come and look at it. We had lots of online inquiries. We sent photos and videos to people. We have a legendary Porsche mechanic who works for us who was under the car with customers, showing them everything, and we tried so hard to sell the thing, and for some reason it didn't sell, and it kind of, in a weird way, like almost felt like it was meant to be. It just got to a point where I was like, it kind of went from being a dream to I was like, actually, I kind of did the classic man maths and was like, oh, if I sell this and borrow this money from here, and then like all these things.
Sell one of my kidneys.
Literally like that. I called it, like when I talked to my boss and manager about it, I was like, this is like a proper moonshot. I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, but like, well, here's a list of how I can make it happen, but I don't know if we can. And yeah, they were really cool, and yeah, it's been a dream for a long time to own a classic 911, but I never thought I'd get such an early one. It's a 1969, so to get a long hood car, I can't believe it. It's insane.
Looks really, really nice as well.
Yeah, I've been driving it. I've already taken it out like in a week. Driven it 3 times. It's already muddy, which I really like. Covered in mud and dust. And yeah, the plan is to really use it and potentially build it into everything. I want everything to be like period correct on it, but build it into a bit of a...
Leave the holes all down there.
There's not going to be any holes in it. I'm not going to do that. I learned my lesson last time. But yeah, build like a bit of a period correct weekend racer. Maybe a half cage and race seats, and it'd be fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, congratulations. You're in the big league now.
Yeah, in the club.
Yeah. As for me, I've had a haircut.
Very good. I when you told me that, I thought it was going to be drastically shorter.
Well, it's 20 centimeters shorter, actually.
Pretty short, yeah.
Had a lot to begin with, so.
Yeah.
So on to the topic of the day.
Yeah.
Which is?
The Mazda Miata, which is a car... I've been really looking forward to this one, actually.
Yeah.
When we... it was always going to be on the list for me. So I've owned one. I guess it was like probably the first proper sports car that I've owned.
It is a proper sports car.
It is a proper sports car, but yeah. Like sports car is such a weird... I'm not mocking the MX-5, the Miata, but like the whole phrase, like sports car.
Yeah, because it covers basically everything from a Miata
like
to
a casual.
Ferrari.
Whereas the Miata to me is like, it's a genuine sports car. So I think there's a lot of cars out there that people call sports cars. not. So yeah, for me it was like probably like my first proper sports car. It was definitely my first rear-wheel drive car, and there'll be a few stories about that later. Because yeah, they do catch you out. But yeah, so it's a car that's really always been pretty dear to me. I had an amazing experience with mine, as we'll talk about. And Felix has experienced one too.
Yeah.
The plan with the show, sorry, just to cut in, but yeah, as Felix said, we're always going to concentrate on one car at a time, and yeah, I feel like there's a real there's not many podcasts that just focus on that one car. We're picking out the ones that
maybe for a reason.
Maybe it's terrible to watch.
It's a terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea. But yeah, just because I like the idea of just getting really nerdy about one thing and just really focusing on that and kind of diving into it rather than jumping all over the place.
So
yeah, that's the plan with the Miata. And as I say, I've got some experience with one, and Felix has spent some time behind the wheel of one.
Yeah,
and I haven't heard about it yet. So
this is an exclusive even for you.
Yeah.
So basically, I've always liked the Miata. I was when they were launched back in '89. I was 6 years old, so I was at an impressionable age. So I've always been aware of them, and my family always had regular Mazdas as cars. So I've always been quite indoctrinated into liking Mazdas. But the model that actually did it for me when I really sort of got into them was and we'll probably get onto this a bit later on, was the 1999 10th anniversary edition, which was an NB. We will probably be discussing NAs. We'll mostly be focusing on NAs, and then I'll do my best to get the conversation into NBs as well.
Yeah.
You're not the biggest NB fan, though.
I don't mind them. I think they're a good looking car, but in my mind right now, and it might just be me being pernickety, but I just don't see it as a classic car at the moment, and I think it will be in the future, and I think they're a lovely shape, but it's an age thing, I think, as well. Like, they're more like a young timer. Like, to me, an MX-5 now, an NA Miata is for sure a classic. I would class that as a classic car.
And if you're new to Mazda Miatas, or MX-5s as they're called in Europe, NA is the first generation, NB is the second, and NC, and then the current generation is the ND. But so like I said, I've always been intrigued by them. I always liked them. Never had the opportunity to drive one up until a few days ago, where a lovely chap called Janne let me have a go in his, for the most part, original NA. I think it was a 1990 or 91 car. That was on lowering springs, but that was about it. And then as a comparison, I got to drive his quite extensively modified ND, which was a 2015 car. That was on coilovers, it had a remap, it had a full exhaust system. I think he said that it was pushing 190 horsepower. And that was, it was really interesting to drive those two back to back to see in what areas the MX-5 has moved on and how they still managed to be an exhilarating drive and actually to maintain some of the original, the feel of the original car.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting, and for me the thing that jumped out at me the most was the effortlessness of driving it, because I'm used to this other thing, and you have to work it quite hard to drive it quickly, whereas the Miata it had power steering, and it just went where you wanted it to go.
Yeah.
And because there's very little weight, there's no inertia. So
it's interesting you say that, because there's a philosophy, I can't pronounce it in Japanese, you probably know this.
Genbeitai.
Look at you, Johnny Japanese.
Johnny Japanese.
Rider and horse is one body.
Yeah.
And it's funny, because I was going to bring this up, but you've just put it perfectly, that it just goes exactly where you want it to go. It feels effortless to drive, and that is very much the philosophy of the thinking behind the car.
Yeah, and it's not just, well, it became very apparent that it's not just management speak. It's actually something that that's becomes very apparent when you drive the car. And I think the Japanese are really good at this, actually doing something and really following a philosophy.
Yeah.
And what when I was researching the Miata, it was quite interesting to realize that they've sort of taken the classic roadster. Obviously,
Yeah.
they were the first to sort of reinvent the classic, for the most part, British roadster.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they did it in a very Japanese way.
Yeah.
They started with a clean slate, and then they sort of realized, okay, what do we want out of this car? And so the end product was the goal, obviously, but they weren't there weren't any constraints as to what components they could use. So they developed an entire platform for it, and with double wishbone suspension all round, with a brand new developed engine. So they ended up with a far superior product to the cars that they were basing it on.
Inspired by and based on. Yeah.
And we'll probably do an MGB one, because that's a really interesting comparison. But that was mostly standard parts that was just thrown together to make a sports car, a brilliant sports car in its own right. But it wasn't very it wasn't a completely new product.
Yeah.
In that sense.
And there's something, I mean, harking back to what we were saying with the 94 as well, with that being a car that was made from what was to hand. There's something incredibly clever. Like, you have to give credit where credit's due, where something like an MGB or a 94 is created using existing parts. It's incredible. But as you say, the cool thing with the Miata was the bespokeness that was created. Everything, the philosophy and the thinking and the engineering that went into it. It's and the cool thing when you were saying that as well, and I was just thinking about these things, and obviously there's a few other cars that have that lineage, but where you can see even to the ND today, it still looks like an MX-5 Miata. The philosophy is still the same. The roadster, the lightweight, front engine rear wheel drive, so much manual gearbox, like so much of that design philosophy and the 50-50 weight distribution, all those things as characteristics that were in the original car, the simplicity, ease of use, like they're still.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's a lot more technology in the newer cars.
And that's even more impressive in a way, because they've actually managed to keep the weight down.
Yeah.
The current generation is a lot lighter than the previous one.
Yeah.
So and it was really interesting, like I said, to experience that. It still felt like in certain areas it still felt like the NA.
Yeah.
Although it was a lot easier to drive, the gearbox was a bit slicker to use.
Yeah.
Not that the NAs was bad in any way. It just took a bit more effort to drive it or to shift gears. So that was really eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
So.
So it's cool. How was the drive itself? You enjoyed getting out? And
it was brilliant.
It's pretty cool to go back to. I didn't realize it was a.
I should just extend a really, really big thank you to Jana for letting me have a go.
That's pretty cool.
That was really, really such a cool guy.
Yeah, and to get to drive the first generation and the current generation, it's
it doesn't
get a contrast. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I had a back in England an Unos Roadster. I think it was a 95. I was trying to find out. It was so long ago. I was trying to look through like old insurance documents and stuff. trying to get a year, but I think it was a 95, and I think the colour was Montego blue. It's like a bluey greeny colour. It was quite a rare colour. I hadn't seen many. It kind of looked almost British racing green in some of the pictures, which you'll probably see when we overlay them. But yeah, it was like a bluey greeny colour, and it was a 1.8 with the. I specifically wanted a 1.8 with the Torsen or Torsen diff. Diff, a mechanical diff rather than a viscous diff.
Yeah, because the early 1.6s had the viscous diff, I think, and then they swapped to Torsen. And then I heard that the facelifted NBs actually got something similar to a Torsen, but not entirely a Torsen diff. But I may be wrong, like always. Yeah. So yeah, so
I had a great few years in that. Like I absolutely love that car. I was looking at it's a car that I wanted to own for a while. I remember Jeremy Clarkson would always go on about you should own an Alpha, like you're a true petrolhead if you own an Alpha. I've driven a few Alphas and they're amazing cars, and I understand that, but to me a Miata, I feel like I 100% feel like every person who's into cars should own a Miata, even if it's just for a weekend to drive it, because
or at least have a go at one.
Yeah, just take one for a drive. Like they are, they're so highly regarded as a driver's car. And again, like the 94, so misunderstood. Like someone's. I completely forgot to write this in the notes, but it just came back to me. I almost use it as like a litmus test as to how into cars someone is, because if someone says to you, I remember someone recently, I can't do too much details because it was a customer and it'll come back to me in some way, but they made a comment about we have a couple at work, we've got a guy who builds race cars at work, and he's got two utterly insane Miatas. One of them is he's got his he's set on a record at a particular racetrack, and it's going to be insane. This car was sat there, and this guy was showing a customer around, and he saw it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's good for going to the hairdressers." And I made some comment, and I was like, and I just immediately lost so much respect for this guy. He was a guy I really liked, but suddenly I was like.
Yes.
For me, it's almost like a litmus test. If someone gets cars, you'll know. If someone likes MX-5s, you know they understand cars. They're really into them. A bit like a 94. And if they dismiss it as a hairdresser's car, you know immediately that they know. Yeah. In my opinion, they know fuck all about cars. Like,
they can probably never have driven one either.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I mean. Yeah, I really don't get that. Just it's a brilliant car, and who cares what people think of you when you drive it? You can't be that fussed about what other people's opinions on you.
I think people belittle them and really misunderstand. So they're brilliant cars. For me, it's a car that I get the Alfa Romeo thing. The Top Gear guys always say that, but for me, like every true petrolhead should own or at least drive a Miata at some point and experience them. And so for me, it was a car that I'd always I'm not really sure where it came from, but I'd always wanted one. And we went and looked at a couple, and I found this. I keep calling it Montego Blue. I think that's what colour it was. But went and found it. It was it'd been imported, being an Unos, and it was a one. Typical car dealer. One lady owned a car, belonged to the wife of the car dealer, but it was actually really nice.
Only driven to church on Sundays.
Exactly, yeah. Never raced in rally. It was a really nice car. They just changed the timing belt on it. It was like 130,000 kilometers, so it was a low mileage car. I took it out for a quick drive. The one we'd seen before was at a really pikey garage, but I think it was an S special. So it had the BBS wheels, it was black BBS wheels, Bilstein suspension, had a half cage, like a Mazda Speed. I think it was a Mazda Speed half cage. So I wanted that one so much, but my dad was like, took one look at the dealer and was like, these guys, like, if you have any issues with the cars, you're not going to get anywhere with these guys. And the other garage you went to, they were really nice guys. This car wasn't actually as cool in like my eyes, but everything kind of felt right. It's that gut feeling when you're buying from a garage, I think, sometimes, that you, even if it's not exactly what you want.
Or when you buy privately as well. You get a feeling for the guy or girl selling the car.
So it's having that trust in them.
Can I just go back, because you had a Unos, and we should probably talk about the different names, because it was obviously, like we said, the MX-5, it was called the MX-5 in Europe, and perhaps some other markets as well. It was called the Miata in the US.
Yeah.
And the Unos was in Japan.
Right? Yes, mine's imported,
and I can't really make out why Mazda decided to do this. Why didn't they call it the Miata in Europe as well?
Yeah.
And Mazda actually have a history about this, because the old humble 323 was called the 323 in Europe and some other places, and in America it was called the Familia. Depending on the generation, it was called the Familia, the Protege, and the Allegro. Allegro, obviously, it probably couldn't have been called this, called the Allegro here, because British Leyland, but they could have gone with something a bit more inspiring.
Yeah, Miata is such a cool word.
And do you know where the name comes from? I've realised that there are quite a few different theories.
I heard it was German.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've read that it was computer generated.
What?
Yeah, and then actually it was the Mazda head of product planning and marketing for the Miata project, who opened a dictionary and saw the word the word Miata, which is Old High German, meaning reward. So that's the truth. Yeah, according to Miata.net, anyway.
So yeah, the naming conventions. It's pretty interesting, but I think universally, MX-5. I mean, Uno seems to be a bit less well known outside of Japan, and
it's probably best known in right-hand drive countries, because obviously it being a Japanese only, the Unos was a Japan only car. It would probably been exported to other right-hand drive countries. So
sorry, got him struggling. So we bought that car from the dealer. So we said earlier about rear-wheel drive cars catching you out. The funny thing with that car was, so we bought it, and then my dad, I was at work during the week, couldn't pick it up on the day. They needed to check some stuff, or usual car dealer thing. It's hard to take a car away from a dealer on the day sometimes, but my dad went and picked it up during the week, and then picked me up after work at the train station. I remember being so excited. Like, I got off the train, saw him in the car park with the car, so I jumped in it and drove him back home and dropped him home, and then went into town to pick my brother up from work. I was like, oh, this is so cool. It was such a lovely sunny day. So I shot into town, picked my brother up, and then we were coming back, and I kind of knew the road. If anyone knows, it's between Godalming and Guildford in the south of England and Surrey, and I think it's called like the B3000 or something. There's a roundabout in there, and on the way in, it's just like a kink. The roundabout's slightly offset, and it's just a kink on the way in to Guildford. But on the way back, it's a properly good right hand as you go into this roundabout. It's like a good little right-hander. And so I went into that at the usual speed I would in a front-wheel drive car, thinking I was pretty clever, and then suddenly got very sideways, not realising that I lifted, because you don't even realise you're doing it, but backed off, so I was like, oh, this is a bit quick, and got massively sideways, and I'd had the car literally for 10 minutes, and fully sideways in a roundabout, and that was, I can remember it so vividly. It was the most insane experience, and like, it felt like armfuls of opposite lock. It was probably like half a turn, but just like a wonderful, slightly scary, but like a funny introduction with my brother in the car as well, which is a really cool memory. But yeah, just getting completely or semi out of control, pretty out of control, within 10 minutes of getting the car. And and then from there, I mean, we had that car. I had that car for probably probably a year, and then my brother brought it off me. He had it for a year. Then a friend brought it off him. So mechanically, like, we put brake pads. We probably put a few tires on it, but I think it was like pads and oil change. It just ran and ran. It was such a great car to drive and own during that time, and I had so many great experiences. As I say, it was a really wonderful way to learn about how to drive a rear wheel drive car. It's a great introduction to oversteer, lift off oversteer, weight transfer as well is another big thing with these cars. I remember recently there's a well-known British driving instructor called Scott Mansell, race driving instructor, not like car driving instructor, race driving instructor, not related to Nigel Mansell bizarrely, but Scott Mansell's like a bit of a legend in the track and racing scene in the UK, and he does coaching, and one of the cars he uses, or the car he uses to coach in, the only car he coaches people in, is an NC Miata, and it's completely standard. He doesn't do anything to the suspension.
That's an interesting choice, because the NC is probably considered as the well, I shouldn't say worst, but probably least good Miata in terms of power to weight ratio.
Yeah, but so he has no interest in the power to weight. It's the I guess those cars, I mean, you can get into the details on the engine, but the engine is really strong in those cars. I think it's a Ford engine in those cars.
It makes sense, because
they're super good. Like, so the durability and reliability and the running cost of it, I think that's why he picks the NC. But the interesting thing for me is that it's unmodified, and what he said, there's two things he was saying about, because people always query him when they go to his driving school and learn to drive, and they're like, they almost expect it's going to be like a 488 Challenger car, or like a race car, or a Caterham or something. And he's got this little stock MX-5, and the two things he says is in a car like that, everything happens much more slowly. And when you're learning to drive on track and racing, his theory, and a lot of people who know about far more than I do about racing and driving, is if you get a fast car on track, everything's happening too fast for you to realise. You're not feeling the weight transfer, where you should be raking, things like that, because it's all happening too quick for you. So it's a slow car, which makes it much better to learn to drive properly. And
it's a quite forgiving car as well.
It's forgiving as well, is another thing. But the second thing is the weight transfer. With soft suspension, you think on a track car you want to set it up, which you would if you were trying to go fast, but for him it's about feeling that weight transfer. And again, the Miata is a really lovely car for learning about weight transfer, how that weight's moving through the car as you're braking and accelerating, coming off the accelerator, how you come off the brakes, and as you go into corners. So for that reason, as I say, it was a great driving experience for me, and the more the ownership experience was great, but the more you dig into these cars and kind of learn about them, you kind of realize how special they are, and how people who really, really know their stuff about driving really appreciate them. So I mean, it's a couple of things for me. So why I like them. So affordability. As I mentioned, it was really good for kind of learning about car control. I had a couple of. I spun it once actually. I had one real dickhead spin. It was funny because I blamed it at the time on. It was one of those days where it just rained. It'd been sunny for ages, and then it rained, and I was like, oh, it's just because the road was really slick because it hadn't rained in ages. So I was like, the road was greasy. They'd overinflated my tires at the garage, which in hindsight, I don't think made that much difference, but that's what I told everyone. It was definitely my
race car excuses,
extra 1 psi or whatever it was that they put on my tires. But basically, I went into a corner too quick in the wet, and panicked, and I'm fairly sure I panicked and lifted off, and ended up going 180 and went backwards across the road. Luckily, nothing was coming the other way, and then hit a traffic. You know those I don't know if you have them in Sweden, but like in England, they're like a bollard with like a light underneath. Like these big plastic bollards, and I went smashed back into that. And then a bus came the other way, and I was just sat there, and I must have looked like such an idiot in this little Miata, like on the opposite side of the road, like reversed into a bollard. So I very sheepishly like pulled away, and was like, lucky I had the roof up. I felt like such an idiot. But yeah, you can. They are forgiving cars though. If you're not, if you're a better driver than I am,
or if you don't drive like a dick.
I don't drive like a dick. Also, good rule of thumb. But yeah, you shouldn't get yourself in too much trouble.
No.
And yeah, they're pretty easy. Being front engined, they're a well balanced chassis and much easier to catch than something like an alternative car that I looked at, which was the MRT. Again, similar price, and I've nearly bought one of those on a couple of occasions. And they are superb little mid-engine cars, but they're much when they go, from what I've seen and what I've heard, with it being mid-engine, it's harder to catch than an MX-5. Other good things I really like about them is open top motoring. I actually really hate convertibles. This will come out a lot on this show. We'll go into that in greater detail. There's a lot of reasons why I don't like them, but I'm not a fan of convertibles generally. But what I do like about convertibles is when you're driving with an open top, you feel a lot more exposed and you get a much bigger sensation of speed. So when I was driving,
so you don't like convertibles, but you like convertibles.
There's a couple of things I like about convertibles, but one is that it slows you down as a driver, and it makes you you feel like you're going, when you're doing 50 miles an hour, you feel like you're doing 70 or 80 miles an hour. So on a B road, I just feel like it slows you down. It makes me more aware, and that's a good thing.
Kind of like comparing a sports bike to a naked bike.
100%, yeah.
You become more aware of the wind noise and everything, and you feel the pace and
that for me is a good thing. Ergonomics on the cars. So you were talking about this earlier, like how everything felt easy. So I remember I'd used mine. It was the only car I had at the time, so I was using it, almost spoiling it because I was using it too much and using it to drive to the train station for work, or like picking up shopping, or going to visit relatives, which is kind of cool using it that way. And it's such a usable car. You haven't got loads of space, but you can just
but I was actually pleasantly surprised at how roomy the cabin was, considering the size of the car.
Packaging again, like the 94 we were talking about, just really clever packaging. But the ergonomic, the thing that stuck with me was, so it kind of become normalised, which is the danger of having a car like that as your only car. But when I went away on holiday and drove a rental car, and then I came back to the Miata and jumped in, and this car that had just kind of almost not gotten boring, but I just completely taken it for granted, I got back into it and I was like, oh my god, everything is in the right place. The shifter, the steering wheel, seating position, and this is a car, like this was like a car that was built in the 90s, and I'd just driven a modern car, got back into it, and I was like, wow, like everything.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm going back to what I was saying previously about it being effortless to drive quickly. After my drive of the MX-5, I got back into my daily, which is a Volvo V70.
Yeah, V70 gang.
Yeah, V70 crew. And I decided, I went back home, or on the way, it was Jana lived in this really lovely part of pretty close by, which the roads were really nice roads, lots of curves, lots of sort of sweeping corners and undulations and things, and I sort of caught myself driving the V70 like I had been driving the MX-5 without realizing.
Yeah.
I was going way too quickly for.
It's like when you go. I always think that when you go go-karting.
Oh yeah.
And you get out and jump into your own car, and then as soon as you get to a roundabout, you go to take the go-kart.
Yeah.
And it's really funny.
But I managed to get back home in one piece at least.
Good. The Volvo made it in one piece.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any brake pads left.
No, probably not. I haven't checked.
Tires.
Yeah, so should we talk a bit about the different engines and generations? Perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned that yours was a 1.8.
Yeah, so I specifically wanted the 1.8, and that's still for me. We're going a bit into buying here, but so if I was going to buy an NA, and we'll talk about our dream set later. I'm not gonna spoil it. Spoil that, but so the 1.8 has a torsion differential as a mechanical differential as opposed to a viscous diff, and I won't go into that because I'm not mechanically minded enough to be able to explain intricacies.
Yeah,
The intricacies. But
yeah,
the Torsen diff
power
is
goes
better.
in, magic happens.
Magic
Power
happens.
goes out to.
With a viscous diff,
to
over
always.
time, you lose some of that magic, or
Yeah.
completely lose it, and it becomes an open diff. Whereas a mechanical diff retains that.
Yeah, and especially now, considering they are going on 30 years old,
Yeah,
a viscous diff
is an open diff.
Yeah, it's pretty much an open
Yeah.
diff, and it needs regular maintenance
Yeah.
to keep it functioning as it intended.
But you saying that, I imagine you do need to rebuild even mechanical diffs.
Yeah, probably.
So,
Okay,
yeah, it's but that's why I went for the 1.8, and it's the same now. That has carried on with the later cars. So with the MB and the NC. So there's always seems to be a smaller capacity engine.
Yeah.
Which is like the base car, and then there's the sport version. So originally it wasn't called the sport, but now with the MB and the NC, the larger capacity engine is the sport version. So they did a 1.6 and a 1.8 in the MB, just like with the NA. But the 1.8 was the sport version had the diff, and it's the same with the NC. The 1.8 engine doesn't have a diff, or maybe has a viscous. I'm not sure, but the 2 litre. The sport version has the Bilstein suspension and the diff. So for me, I mean, I'm talking from my point of view, but I would always look for like the sport version or the car with the limited slip differential.
Because it is a sports car, so yeah.
And also the cost of installing a diff is you're looking at like $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, if you can get one second hand, but it's not a cheap thing to buy. So.
No. So like you were saying, we have the basic 1.6 NA, which came in 116 horsepower to begin with, and then they did a 90 horsepower one as well. I don't think they were sold new here in Sweden, at least.
Yeah.
And you had the 1.8 that was around 130 horsepower.
Yeah, like 130. But it was slightly heavier on me, which I didn't realise. So you gain.
I felt it was a bit tricky to find proper weights for the different.
It always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really annoying. I think we'll do an issue. It is an issue. An episode on weights, and maybe I was talking the other week about 1,000 kilo cars. But yeah, that weight thing is really, because I remember when I was researching, I wrote an article recently on cars around the 1,000 kilo mark. That for me is for anyone who knows. Who's into cars, like 1,000 kilos is like the magic number. But I remember when I was trying to research weights, it was a nightmare. Everyone was all over the place. And
sometimes you well, we shouldn't go into that. It'll completely super boring, but yeah. So, but basically the NA 1.6 weighs below 1,000 kilos.
Yeah.
And the 1.8 is slightly heavier, just over. And then you had the NB with the 1.6 that had 110 horsepower, and the NB with the 1.8 that had 140, and in 2001 the 1.8 had variable valve timing and was bumped up to 146 metric horsepower, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which in a car is 1,000. I mean, no, the MB was slightly heavier, but yeah, again, like we were saying with the 94, if you anything that's 1,000 kilos, like once you get to 100 horsepower in a 1,000 kilo car, it's going to be interesting. Look at like something like the Fiat 100 horsepower Suzuki Swift Sport. There's
Citroen AX.
Citroen, no, that's way under 1,000.
Yeah, no.
Like 700.
Yeah, okay.
How much are they? Like 600 or 700. Oh, we should do a Citroen AX sometime. Me and Felix both bizarrely.
But you had the sporty one.
No, I didn't. I had the debut. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I won.
I had the 1.1.
Oh, you son of a bitch! Always one up with me. But yeah, my grandmother had a GTI and fucking traded it because it wasn't a good first car for me, apparently.
That's
so
true.
She traded it for the 1 litre,
well,
which I never forgave her.
Considering what you've been telling us about your adventures in the MX-5, I can probably see where she's
probably
coming from.
why she didn't want me to be driving a fast car.
But one thing that I feel is a bit interesting about the Miata is it really launched this trend of almost every manufacturer having some sort of open top two-seater in their lineup. But what's even more interesting is that the other manufacturers went about building one of those cars in completely different ways. Like you said, the MR2, which was more racy, mid-engine, doesn't even have a boot, I think.
Has like a tiny trunk in there.
Yeah. And the Fiat Barchetta, which is all about looks, and actually was front wheel drive.
They're a pretty little car. I mean, that could be another car we do an episode on. There's one that's daily driven that drives past me, and like we're in Sweden, it's pretty freaking cold here, and I think that's pretty cool that someone's daily driving one of those.
That was another thing about the MX-5 when I drove it. The heating works surprisingly well.
Yeah, Japanese.
Japanese technology and Japanese engineering. So we.
What were we talking about?
Engines and things.
We're getting technical.
Yeah, we are getting technical. I should mention as well that the MB 1.8 got a 6-speed gearbox. I think that was when the 1999 10th anniversary came out. I think that was the first car to come with a 6-speed manual.
Yeah.
And those are closer ratios than the 5-speed, so they're not.
Interesting.
So you get direct drive in 5th rather than 4th. So I don't think it will help reducing the RPM wheel on the motorway, but it will probably help with acceleration.
Yeah, and feeling like a race car.
Yeah. Because
changing bloody gears.
6 speeds.
I was going to talk about modifying. It was a note. I just made a note earlier.
You just can't leave things alone, can you?
I didn't even think that I was going to find something.
Go ahead. We've been going for 43 minutes.
Yeah, I haven't talked about modifying for 43 minutes.
No, that's impressive.
I mean, one of so there's two things here. So the in terms of aftermarket availability of parts and stuff, it's almost it's got to be one of the most modifiable cars ever built. Like, there's such a huge amount of parts you can get for these cars, and I think what I love about this, like I love about the 94 as well. We were talking about the versatility. You can build this into you could build a pristine, like a Concours classic show car, if you really wanted to make it pristine, go and win some. If you like cleaning cars, if that's what you enjoy doing, you can go and do that. You can you could have a ratty old one that you drive around Europe and take on crazy road trips. It will happily do that. It could just be a nice Sunday sports car. You can build rally cars. People have definitely built some really cool rally cars out of them. Drift car, loads of drift cars, drift Miatas. The only thing people say with them is because of the short wheelbase, they are not the easiest car to drift in, but there's certainly a lot of people doing it. And then also track and race cars, like the racing classes and the racing that takes place in these cars. It's such a well supported car in that regard. So they're just incredibly versatile, but it's almost like a joke now. If you go onto any forum and someone's like, what track car should I get? What car should I go for Sunday? Like almost any scenario you can think of, like what daily should I get that? MX-5 is like the default answer. It's really funny, but it's for a reason, like for a good reason. It has almost become a joke, but for a good reason. It is like the internet's default answer.
We're having a kid. Get an MX-5.
Yeah, like they are awesome little things. But yeah, onto the modifying. There's so many options, as I say. Whichever direction you want to take the car in. If you want to build something incredibly pristine and original, there's now specialists, because the values of the cars are climbing, and original cars cars restored to original condition have a value, which I think is a really nice thing.
I think there's actually an auction for one. I can't find it, but there's an auction for one that's been driven only 600 kilometers or something.
No way.
Right now here in Sweden. I haven't looked at what it will.
Is it here in Sweden?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. I want to see what that goes for.
Yeah,
That's really interesting. What, an NA?
NA. One
Jeez.
97, so the last of the NAs. 1.6, I think.
I can, working in the classic car trade, like, I can fully understand why people do that, but it makes me sad at the same time. It's like you... I kind of always think, like, if you're not having fun in your car, what the fuck are you doing with it?
Yeah. It would be quite a fun thing to do if we ever get all the YouTube millions in the world.
Yeah, it won't.
Would
won't
buy
be long for it.
no. A few more episodes and
Yeah.
we'll be there. Then we should just pick one of those really low mileage cars up and just drive it.
Drive the shit out of it. Yeah.
No, well, just use it and because I mean cars really suffer from not being used.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It just makes me sad as well.
Yeah,
I just think the problem with things like that as well is, does the next owner buy it? That's the debate. Does the next owner buy it and then do as you say and drive and enjoy it, or do they mothball it as well and put it in a...
Probably. And I'd say because considering it's the low mileage that sort of defines the car.
Yeah.
You can't afford to use it, and you end up just sticking it in the garage or sticking it in a collection, and it becomes an investment.
Yeah. You're right. It's predetermined by that mileage. You're not going to buy that if you wanted to buy a car you'd use.
That's what really, really tempting to just use one of those.
Yeah. Piss everyone off on the.
It's. I think. Oh, battery's dying.
Oh, god damn it! Technology every time.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about. We haven't gone into too much details. I mean, there's so much that's written online about these, so we didn't want to go too heavily into that.
And we'll put some links to useful sources in the video description as well, so we won't have to bore you with us just reading things.
You made a nice note here about. God, this is segueing, or not even segueing.
It's just and that was something completely different.
Just something I've read that's completely different to what we're talking about. But Alex Kirsten.
Oh yeah.
Has one. If you want to, I really like Car Throttle. Those guys are so grounded and just know exactly what they're about, and I love that they just focus and kind of make heroes out of these cool ridiculously budget cars. It's awesome. But what he has an MX-5 that he's now
called Phil.
Yeah. He's done some really cool trips, like taking it to the ring.
Yeah. He blew up the engine on the ring.
Blew up the engine on the ring. Put a V6 in it.
Yep.
It's still going.
That's allegedly Porsche derived.
Really?
Yeah. Well, he keeps saying that because it's actually a Jaguar engine, and
I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard that actually. Yeah.
It's a bit of a joke.
Yeah. So that just gets me onto. I was thinking earlier about power modifications. Sorry, I've just gone straight back to modifications again. But you can turbocharge these. I haven't looked too much into supercharging, but I've known of
Janne, the guy who I borrowed the cars from. He's got, I think he has about 8 MX-5s, and he's supercharging at least one of them.
Interesting. So I've seen a lot of turbo MX-5s on track and on the street, but not a NA supercharged, but I imagine there's plenty of kits out there.
Oh, yeah.
And I know the guy where I work has got a ND that's been supercharged. There's lots of bolt-on kits. But the other thing as well is engine conversions, and we mentioned then the V6. There's a company called Rocketeer?
I think so.
In the UK, who take a Jaguar V6 and convert your Miata to a V6, which is a really cool kit. Completely transforms the characteristics. Obviously, the big dollar per torque, and there's definitely a few engine swaps. But I mean, that's the basic stuff. I imagine people have done some really crazy
Yeah,
swaps.
I'm sure there are plenty of Americans who've stock LS engines in them.
Yeah.
And I don't really see why, but okay, fair play.
Well, it's kind of, it's a bit of a, I imagine that's a handful to drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for me,
I'm sure.
for me, these cars are best lightly tuned, a bit of lightly tuned on a naturally aspirated engine. I think
Yeah,
they're
I think so too.
they're proper momentum cars, and yeah, I think a lot of people talk about that. Driving how it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow, and that's definitely a philosophy that I buy into. I've driven and owned a ton of different cars, and it's always anyone you talk to who's into cars, who really knows their cars and drives stuff, will tell you that you can have as much fun in something that's around 1,000 kilos or 100 horsepower will be more fun than anything with huge amounts of power on a little twisty road.
Yeah,
because you can't put that power down, and especially on a public road, you can't.
Exactly, yeah. It's I get a kick out of being able to use all the power, not all the time, obviously, but on occasion. I mean, get into a Ferrari F8 Tributo or something.
That was the car I was thinking. I was trying to think of a car, and Tributo was the car.
Yeah, 720 horsepower. Where are you going to use that?
Yeah,
just makes no sense. It's just total waste of horsepower.
Yeah, and yeah, I completely agree. I genuinely think, and no, just God, we're really jumping around, but it's just reminding me of. I remember when I think this is when we owned the MX-5, or maybe we had the RX-8 then. I can't remember, but. There were Evo magazine did their car, I think it was car of the decade or something, or like best driver's car of all time. It was like a big bumper issue. I think they did 100 cars. They went through 100 different cars and listed them. And I remember you read through the article and it just kind of got down, and like their car of the year, they kind of filter it down to the final few cars. And I think the MX-5 came 7th, but made it into the top 10, which is incredible. And the cars that were in there were I remember the Ferrari F50 was in there. I think a Caterham was probably in there. But the really, really high caliber cars. But a Miata that you can pick up for a couple of grand made it into was considered amongst some absolutely incredible machinery. So
that's a real testament to the qualities of the car.
I think if you talk to anyone who knows about cars, as you were just saying, Felix, if you took an F8 Tributo and a Miata to a twisty road, I think you would have more fun.
I think so too.
Miata. I think most people,
which
sounds idiotic when you're talking about it, and on paper when you look at the numbers of those cars and the values and what you should get from a Tributo for what you're paying for it. But I reckon in a $2,000 Miata you'd have far more fun.
Yeah, because if you're in a 300 grand Ferrari, you're very, very aware of that you're in a 300 grand Ferrari, and you won't have the enjoyment of driving it because you'll be just really scared of actually wrecking it.
Yeah, completely.
Whereas if you're in a Miata, if you wreck it, you die. So nothing to worry about then.
It's just instant death.
Yeah.
But it is that, it's that idea of with any car, and it's something. I mean, I guess I've always loved some of that about budget cars. There's that humbleness about them. There's also that thing of if you do crash it, especially if you go on track or if you've been it on the road, and you shouldn't have ever been a car on the road. Like if you're driving like that, then that's a whole other debate. But
but
if you do crash a car on the road, like if it's a Clio 172 or a Miata or something like that, it's not going to change your life. Whereas if it's a F8 Tributo,
so long as you're not injured or dead.
But if it is something expensive, it's going to really mentally and financially scar you. So there is something. That's another reason I'm attracted to these cheap little hero cars.
We've been going for nearly an hour already. And we said before we started that we should try and keep this fairly short.
Yeah, so take some breaks because I keep coughing as well, which we haven't done. So apologies for my coughing.
You're really soldiering on.
Should we? We'll take a short break now. We'll just pause and then we will come back for the final stage where we're going to talk about owning, buying, a few more general points, and then the next episode. Have you got anything to add to that?
Sounds good.
Cool.
What to look for when you're buying a car? where you're buying an MX-5.
Cool. We'll be back in a moment.
Okay, so welcome back. We just realised that the mic hasn't been recording, so we're gonna have to make do with
every I say every episode. This is the second episode.
100% of the episodes, this piece of crap.
Fuck this mic.
Yeah, it hasn't worked.
Felix nearly smashed it against.
Yeah, but it's not mine. I borrowed it.
So you can't do that.
Yeah, and I was advised that it make sure it actually records before it starts talking.
To be fair, you were.
Yeah, and I thought I did, and yeah. Okay, so
you did tell you to check that.
Yep. So final few minutes. We've been going for
50 minutes.
50 minutes, I think. If
we
can keep this under an hour.
Anyone wants to hear us.
Oh yeah. People will be asleep by now. You
had a little section of general stuff that I thought was really nice. Just in the notes. Friendly Owners Club, as you were saying.
I have to say I was really, really impressed by the Miata Owners Club, because when we did some research and I actually wanted to get into a car to try out, I reached out to the Miata Owners Club on Facebook, and everyone was super, super helpful and really friendly and really, really welcoming. So as a sort of, I guess you could talk about that in a general ownership experience perspective, and that's a big part for me, at least, to know that the Owners Club is a really friendly bunch.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with the car itself being quite it's not really it's not a lot of pretension in the car, and maybe that reflects on the owners. I don't know, but it's a brilliant car. It's a brilliant Owners Club. So yeah. Thank you.
On that note, actually, we will always try and drive these cars. It's something we've kind of set out as a principle, if that's the right word, but the cars we're going to do, we either owned or have found the time to drive. I don't want to talk about stuff, just regurgitate stuff that we found on the internet. We want to drive these cars and experience them, and kind of use it as an excuse in a way to drive. Drive some interesting cars.
And that's why we also focus on the cars that are quite affordable. I mean, if there's someone out there with a Ferrari 250 short wheelbase that's willing to let us have a go, we'll be happy to make it
for Sunday.
Yeah, we'll be happy to make an episode of that car as well. But I don't think that's very possible.
But yeah, you never know, Felix.
No, you never know.
You've got to aim high.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You were talking about modifying. Maybe I should talk a bit about what to look out for when you are, if you're on the hunt for one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
I think that will make for quite a short list, because there's really one thing that you need to look out for, and that's rust.
Rust, yeah.
Like all old cars, but the MX-5 is no exception. They do rot quite substantially, especially around the sill area.
Sills, yeah, I was going to say, it's like a 944, isn't it?
Yeah. And also around the windscreen. And then the NB tend to go with the on the chassis rails. I think you can inspect. Yeah, you can inspect it through the wheel well in the front. I think we could probably have an overlay of what it should and shouldn't look like.
Yeah, we'll show some pictures.
But that's basically it. I mean, as long as it hasn't been heavily modified, it's quite a sturdy piece of kit, sort of engine and drivetrain wise. Look out for the rust, because rust is expensive, as we discussed in the 9-4 episode as well. It's expensive to fix, and especially if there's paintwork involved. And like we said, the viscous diffs are a bit more finicky and a bit less good than the later 1.8.
A bit less good.
A bit less good. That's me being diplomatic. The Torsen diff is the one to have. I think there are cars with open diffs altogether as well. I think the NA that I drove was an open diff. And as long as you're not
I mean, if your goal with the car is to just go for nice Sunday drives, I don't think you'll be
able to tell the difference between a Torsen car and a viscous or an open diff one.
No, only when you start pushing it hard to get it on track, you'll definitely notice.
I was speaking to a mate of mine who's built, I think he's built 2 Miata drift cars, and he said that the 6-speed manual gearbox is a bit more robust than the 5-speed.
Good to know.
Yeah, but I mean, that's when you're really starting to push the output, the horsepower up. So yeah, if you're after an original car, just buy on condition. That's the general advice, and I think that will be the general advice on each and every car that we will be discussing.
I always say this to customers when they're looking at cars, just think about how you're going to use the car as well.
Yeah.
You were just saying there, like if you're just going to poodle around and buy ice cream and just do nice little short journeys, you don't really need a sport or a car with a diff in it. So that opens up more options. It becomes really annoying when you're looking for something specific on a car because it immediately narrows down the amount of availability.
Having said that, should we discuss our dream?
That was just gonna set it up perfectly.
We're we're so in sync, aren't we?
Perfect. So what would be your dream? Well, would you buy one?
That's
the first question.
Yeah, I was actually.
This is an interesting because I've brought one, so I know it works. But would you?
Actually, hand on heart,
I could say that if someone put a gun to my head and told me to get rid of the 911.
Like your wife, someone like your wife.
Yeah, no, well, I'd chuck her out.
I'm going to tell her that later.
Yeah, she won't.
She won't watch this anyway.
I'm going to tell her.
No, you won't. But if I was forced to sell the 911, I think I'd be looking to replace it with the Miata.
No way.
Yeah, because I think
that's big news, really.
Yeah, but because I think that
before we did this, you'd had no experience or real. I don't know how much interest. I say you had no interest, but
I had interest. I just I'd never driven one.
Yeah,
but I think that and that's a general. That's another discussion. But I think that if I were to get rid of the 911, I'd be looking to get something a bit more affordable.
Yeah,
and something that's not reminding me of the 911 in a sense. Because in that case, I would just be missing the 911.
And like a 944 or something. Or
yeah. But I think I'd actually be very tempted to buy an MX-5, but it would have to be the facelifted NB 1.8 6-speed with the sport pack, and preferably in the they did sort of a really light blue metallic paint.
Yeah.
And I'd be really tempted to get one of those. And apart from that, I'd want it to be have as little as few optional extras as possible. So cloth seats, no wooden steering wheel, no aircon.
Just keep it nice and simple.
Yeah.
And what's appealing to me with the NB is that it's basically a development of the NA. I have obviously never driven an NB, but I had a sit-in one, and it feels just like the NA, only a bit more plush, a bit more comfortable. I think that's a sweet spot for me. How about you?
So there's an interesting thing for me with Miata. It's probably the only car I've really, really regretted selling and that I would buy back. So my actual kind of dream would be to find the one that I had and buy that back, because I've always had this idea of buying one and like properly putting a proper cage into it, because I didn't modify anything. It's one of the few, ironically, one of the few cars that I haven't modified or done anything to. So I'd probably dream scenario would be to buy that back and then properly do it, build it into the car, a fast road car with a half cage that I can use on track and just enjoy the hell out of. So that would be one choice. But if I couldn't do that and I had an unlimited budget, they made a version called the RS Limited, which I don't think is particularly well known, but it was based on the S Specials. It still had the built-line suspension, the same BBS wheels, the 15-inch kind of what do you call them, hairpin or split spoke wheels. So yeah, looks like a pretty normal looking car. But then the thing that you notice, other than the colour obviously being different to the S Special, it's finished in Montego blue, which I think was the same colour as mine. But the really cool thing, the big thing for me is that they came with Recaros, but not just like fat leather Recaros, actual proper fixed back, like a pole position style Recaro seat that was actually carbon Kevlar, which is insane. Like, to come with a production car that you could buy from a dealership, to come with carbon Kevlar Recaro buckets is pretty special.
Because that sort of puts a kink in one of my preconceptions about the Miata, is that they sort of deliberately made it not the best it could be, but sort of the most true to form's roadster. They didn't want it to be the fastest or the best handling. They just wanted to build a car that made you feel as good or as one with the car as possible.
Yeah.
And then for them to chuck some carbon Kevlar sports seats in, that has to be applauded.
100%. The other thing as well with that car is it had a Lighten flywheel too. Which, have you driven a car with Lighten? Yeah. Just the revs, like the pickup of revs, it feels like a race car.
Actually, sorry to interrupt, but I just realised another thing that's worth looking out for when you're buying one. If you're looking at an early NA, make sure it's got the long. I'm gonna have to look. Basically the early cars had a problem with the crankshaft.
Oh, interesting.
That they would break.
Yeah.
And later cars, later NAs and all the cars that came after had what's called the long nose crankshaft.
Oh, interesting.
And that's that mitigated that problem. So sorry.
Good point. No, an important point to note. But yeah, so that would be it for me. So it'd either be buy back my original car and build my dream NA, or buy an RS Limited, and yeah, they're not easy to get hold of and not cheap. But for the seats alone and the fact that it has a Lighten flywheel from factory and Bilstein suspension, BBS wheels, it's like there's not really much you need to modify in a car. No, it's pretty cool. Stick a half gauge in and you're away.
Everything you need.
Everything you need in a car. I think we can wrap up there. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
We haven't actually decided which car we are doing for the next episode. I had the Mercedes R107 down. So we haven't decided for sure if that's going to be the next car, but one car we've been talking about is the Mercedes R107. It's a car I've driven a few times. We have a few of them at work, which is really nice, so we've got access to them, and as I said earlier, it's important for us to be able to drive these cars, so when we're talking about these things, it's not just stuff that we're reading online, it's actually our own experiences that we're talking about.
But would be a nice break as well to go to sort of do something that's not a 2 or 2+2 seater sports car, to do something that's a very
different car. And the cool thing as well, and I always think you should keep an open mind with cars and experiencing new things. Like for me, an R107 doesn't fit into. It's not a performance car or a sports car. It's a proper like GT cruiser touring car, and that's not a car I have any interest in buying. Yeah, I would possibly own one of these, and I've enjoyed driving them. And it's a very different kind of car to drive, but they're also very affordable at the moment. They can be expensive. We've had a couple at work. We had a Brabus Classic restored one, and we'll go into more details about that. There was a lot of money. That was about 80,000 euros, but we have another one at work at the moment that is 15,000 euros. And we'll show some
It's a
pictures.
lot of
in
car
bit.
for the money.
Yeah, and there's a guy in Japan that I follow who's changed and I think he's widened the wheels. It looks like he's taken the stock wheels and widened them on his and lowered it, and it's just the most stunning looking car. And when you think you can pick something like that up for 15,000, it's a really stylish.
And also, sorry, I keep interrupting you.
It's going to be worth it.
Yeah, maybe. Let's see. Well, I was just saying that, thinking that if any of you have any suggestions on cars that you want us to discuss, please leave a comment and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. We have a massive list.
Or if you have a car, that's even better. If you're based in Sweden,
within 2 hours of Stockholm.
Yeah,
getting pretty specific. But yeah, for sure.
Not being picky.
That's a really good point. So yeah, if there's anything you guys think of, but yeah, we've got. I'm really happy with the list we got. I'm excited. There's we've got like a Mini
It's
on there,
constantly growing.
Alpha 105, BMW 30, Mercedes 190e, Porsche 968 Club Sport. That's one of my dream cars. So yeah, there's a load of cool things. Even like 170, I would say that one actually. Be a clear 170 Cup. Like that's a cool little car. There's going to be some really fun things. So I'm really looking forward to working through these and doing some more. So hopefully that was enjoyable, and you've either learned something or it's been interesting in some way.
Or you've fallen asleep.
Or you've fallen asleep. It's also possible.
Yeah. And please like, share, and subscribe.
Well remembered, Felix.
Yeah, I've done
you're
my
born to
homework.
be a YouTuber.
Oh yeah, I am. I am one now.
Fame hungry.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, cool. Thank you very much, guys. And again, look forward to the next episode.
Yeah. Or
Please.
don't.
Someone look forward to it.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.